Hi, everyone, and welcome to God's Plan, Your Part, a podcast where our goal is to read the entire Bible in a year, seeking to understand God's plan of redemption while discovering daily and practically your part in it.
Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are looking at Psalm 89, 96, 100, 101, 105, and 132. So we have quite a bit of Psalms to cover today. Like always, I'm not going to walk you through every single one, but I do encourage you to either listen to them or read them. I just want to talk through a couple that stuck out to me. One of the things that I'm noticing, so as we're following like the narrative of what's happening, we are now in a place where David has become king. And so what I'm noticing in the Psalms that we're reading is that some of these Psalms are now like kingship Psalms that celebrate the reign of David. And that is important because the people are going to be celebrating the fact that they're united under David. We talked about that a couple of days ago. But also they're going to start to speak more and more of God's covenant with David. So I just want to start us off here with Psalm 100. There is a popular line in it, enter his gates with thanksgiving, his courts with praise. The thing I want to focus on is verse 3. Know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who made us and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Yesterday, we looked at Psalm 23 and we talked about how this shepherding example is going to be used a lot because ultimately shepherding is this idea of good leadership under God. Jesus is the ultimate good shepherd. Here, the psalmist is talking about how we are the sheep of God's pasture. We are his people and we rejoice because God is caring for us in his pasture. And because we are the sheep of our Lord's pasture, we can be thankful and we can celebrate the fact that God cares for us. As I was reading over that psalm, I read over it a couple times, and the thing that stuck out to me is I don't know if I take enough time just to rest in the fact that we are God's children. Like, what an incredible opportunity that we have to be chosen as sons and daughters of God and celebrate that. Like, oftentimes I kind of fall in the category of looking for something to do for God. And I know I don't have to do that all the time, or I'm looking for God to move in some miraculous way. But we can rest and we can have peace knowing that we are actually sons and daughters of God. He cares for us. He looks out for us. And that should actually drive us to praise and worship. We don't need to see God do some kind of incredible miracle around us every day. We don't need to be begging God to do things every day. Sometimes we can just rest and celebrate. And I think that's at the heart of this. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name. Like, bless God just for being God. Like, just for choosing you and providing for you and caring for you, but just for being a gracious, merciful, loving God. You think about the journey we've been on day in and day out. It's so common for us to see how God is patient and merciful and compassionate. And every single one of us have benefited from God's grace and compassion. Romans 3 says, all of us are sinners, none of us are righteous, and therefore all of us benefit from the fact that God had compassion on us and chose us in spite of our sin. And so I just encourage you today to be thankful for that, to be grateful for that, to celebrate God for that. Enter his courts with thanksgiving and with praise. Give thanks to God for that. And then we move into Psalm 101. This is a psalm that David wrote, and it's basically him describing, I think, what kind of king he wants to be. Now, if you know the story of David, you know he definitely has some high highs and some low lows, so he doesn't hit this out of the park every single time. But Psalm 101 is really interesting because you know that King Saul was a bad king. He fell pretty badly. He was not walking in the way of the Lord. And so David here is writing this psalm, I think, as a way of processing who he wants to be and how he wants to be seen as a king. So he calls out things like walking in a path that is blameless. He wants to have integrity of heart. He doesn't want to set anything worthless before his eyes. That is a tall order. Imagine if that was true of anyone around you, that they have set nothing worthless before their eyes. It makes me convicted of like hours spent hanging out watching Netflix. A perverse heart shall be far from me. It's just David is setting a high bar and trying to live that way. He goes on to say, no one who practices deceit shall dwell in my house. No one who utters lies shall continue before my eyes. Morning by morning, I will destroy all the wicked in the land. Like David is writing this psalm, having a high level of righteousness in mind because he wants to be a good king. He wants to be honoring to God because God has chosen him to lead his people. And so it's pretty interesting to look through this as kind of David's journal entry on what kind of king do you want to be. Now, it is sad. Eventually, we're going to see him make some pretty bad decisions. And we've seen him in the past already make some not great decisions, but he is trying to keep his focus on the Lord. I think perhaps that's why he's known as a man after God's own heart, even though he has flaws, even though he does not always hit the mark. He is primarily concerned with honoring God with his life and honoring the covenant that God has made with him. So speaking of that covenant, you can look over at Psalm 132. We're skipping over 105. You can read that one for yourself. But Psalm 132 is a celebration of God's covenant with David. I guess we haven't talked about covenants a ton on the podcast. So if you're unfamiliar with that kind of language, basically a covenant is an unbreakable promise between two parties. In this case, it is God and David. And basically, God has promised David that if his household obeys his statutes, he will establish David's kingship and house forever. And the entire world will benefit from the line of kings that come from David. And so Psalm 132 is a celebration of that. You can see in verse 11 of Psalm 132, the Lord swore to David a sure oath from which he will not turn back. One of the sons of your body I will set on your throne. If your sons keep my covenant and my testimonies that I shall teach them, their sons also forever shall sit on your throne. For the Lord has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his dwelling place. This is my resting place forever. Here I will dwell, for I have desired it. This is God clearly speaking, or at least the psalmist quoting what God has already spoken, that David's descendants will be kings forever if they obey the Lord. And so the way that this connects to us is that Jesus is a descendant of David. That's very, very important when we get to the New Testament narrative. And so Jesus is a fulfillment of the Davidic covenant. So just like Abraham was promised to be a blessing to all nations, David's kingship is promised to be a blessing to all nations. Jesus Christ fulfills both of those, being a descendant of Abraham and a descendant of David. And so that is radically important because it is how God has chosen to fulfill those covenants. And we live under a new covenant that is established in Jesus' blood, that we can have right relationship with God through Christ, our mediator. So there's quite a lot of interesting things in the Psalms today. I encourage you to go read them for yourself or stick around for the reading. Make sure you listen to them and just think about how they stick out to you, how they impact you today. Take some time to pray about it. Ask the Lord to reveal some things to you. As far as your part today, I think a big theme for me is just resting in the fact that you've been chosen by God to be part of his family. It's a really, really big deal that the creator of the universe is concerned about you and your life. And so strive to live a life that honors him and lifts up his name, just like David was trying to do, just trying to establish a kingship that honors the Lord. And so I encourage you to do the same. We'll be back again tomorrow. Tomorrow we're jumping back into some narrative in 2 Samuel. So we'll see you then. Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.